I told my wife I was leaving for a week, the kind of trip that used to knit us back together when I'd roll home with stories and a goofy grin. I even set a bouquet on the counter and tucked a Bordeaux into the fridge, promising to share it when I returned early and surprised her at the door. That was the plan I said out loud. The plan I kept to myself was different. I didn't pull onto the interstate. I circled the block, killed the engine 2 streets over, and watched the porch through my phone. The house lights glowed soft as if nothing in our life had shifted, as if a bottle and a few flowers could erase the distance that had crept in like fog. I wanted to believe in romance. I wanted that version where I ring the bell and she laughs and we eat takeout on the couch like we used to. Instead, I sat alone in a parked car, jacket zipped to my throat, the app open, the screen bright against the dark. Somewhere between love and doubt, I made a choice I never thought I'd make. I stayed. It wasn't a game. It wasn't revenge. It was the kind of test you invent when talking feels like shouting into a well. I told myself I'd be back by dinner. I'd set the table, light a candle, make it right. But the longer I watched the quiet door, the louder the questions got. How did we end up here? What was I not seeing? By midnight, one small sound would make me choose between pretending and protecting. I wish I could tell you that sound was a laugh, or a key turning home, or the soft scrape of a chair on tile. But what I heard was the kind of noise that changes the temperature in your bones. And suddenly the bouquet felt like a lie I told myself, and the Bordeaux felt like a goodbye in a bottle. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just listened, counting my breaths, willing the truth to pick a side. Every creak sounded like a confession, gust against the gutter like a warning, and my hands shook around the phone as the minutes thinned to thread. To understand why I did it, you need to see the little things I kept explaining away. Before the watching and waiting, there was us, loud and easy, the kind of love that didn't require proof. We built a life out of small rituals. Friday nights at the diner, her ordering the same cherry pie, me stealing the last bite and pretending I hadn't. Saturday mornings were for pancakes that I always burned on the first batch, and for music playing too loud while we danced in socked feet across the kitchen tile. On Sundays, we drove with no destination, windows down, our playlist shuffling between her old soul favorites and my road songs, the two of us singing off-key and grinning through the wrong lyrics. We named our potholes, our shortcuts, our lucky parking spaces. We passed each exit like it was a promise to keep going, together. Back then, her hand found mine without thinking. She'd hook her finger into my belt loop when we stood in line, bump my shoulder to claim the sunniest seat, tuck a note inside my lunch if I had a long day ahead. I'd send her pictures of crooked clouds that looked like animals, leave a thermos of coffee on the hood of her car, text her a line from the song we'd been looping all week. We were fluent in little kindnesses. We made a home that looked lived in, not staged. A thrift store couch with the squeaky spring we learned to avoid. A gallery of fridge magnets from places we'd never been but hoped to see. A stack of mismatched mugs from family gifts and yard sales. We framed our first apartment key. We saved the wine cork from the night we decided to try for more. I'm not saying it was perfect. We argued about laundry, about spending, about whose turn it was to scrape the ice from the windshield. We got tired. We took shortcuts. But even our disagreements had an end point, a soft landing, a joke that found us on the other side. The distance didn't have a place to live then. I remember the warmth of her knee against mine under the table, the way she would tilt her head when she listened like she was catching my words before they fell. I remember the silence we liked, not the silence we feared. I remember thinking that whatever the world threw at us, we would bend, not break. We didn't break in a day. It was 1,000 tiny splinters. Slowly, routines shifted. The playlist became separate headphones. Breakfasts became staggered. Our jokes forgot their punchlines. Evenings filled with screens instead of each other. I told myself it was a season, a slump, just life. Then came the first splinter. I couldn't ignore Dot. It started with the phone flipping face down. She used to leave it anywhere, screen lit with family photos and reminders. Now it lived under her palm like a secret. One night at dinner, I asked for a recipe picture and watched her hesitate, then typed the passcode with her shoulder turned. "They made me change it at work," she said, smiling small, as if passwords were a dress code I'd never understand. The small things piled up because small things are easy to ignore. "Book club ran late," she'd say, dropping her shoes in the hallway. But when I ran into our neighbor who hosts the club, she said they'd canceled for the week. Must have been a mix-up, I told myself, and I carried the groceries in with a grin like someone who doesn't hear alarms. She started taking the phone to the shower, to the mailbox, to the garage. New notifications flashed from apps we never used. I told myself it was nothing. People pick up new habits. People get private. People change. Then there were the charges. A boutique receipt from across town slipped into our joint statement, a place she always joked was too fussy for her. A midday rideshare ping on a Tuesday. She swore she spent reorganizing the pantry. A charge at a hotel lounge, 2 cities over. Tagged to our card on a day, I could have sworn she ate leftover pasta with me on the couch. I invented explanations because peace is addictive. Maybe she grabbed a gift. Maybe the bank mistagged it. Maybe I'm tired and making shadows where there's only light. I tried to talk around the edges. "How's the club? You still meeting your sister on Thursdays?" Each answer fit like a shoe that almost works. I hated that I was measuring her words at all. I hated the man I was turning into, a librarian of minor doubts. Maybe I was paranoid until I found the receipt I wasn't meant to see. It was folded into the pocket of her raincoat when I hung it by the door. A room number, a date, and a name I didn't recognize stared back at me from thin paper. My stomach went cold, but my voice stayed quiet. I tucked it back, hung the coat gently, and stood in the doorway, breathing alone. That receipt decided what I'd do next. After the raincoat receipt, I stopped arguing with myself and started planning. I told her I needed to be out of town for a week, a route that would keep me busy and out of reach. She nodded too quickly, like someone agreeing with a forecast she can't change. "Text me when you stop," she said, turning back to the sink. My voice sounded steady. My heart did not. I set the stage the way a hopeful man would. I bought a fresh bouquet and chilled a Bordeaux, a promise to open it together when I surprised her early. Beside them, I left a small wrapped box with a note that read, "For us when I get back." It was a decoy and a prayer. If she mentioned it, maybe we were still us. If she ignored it, maybe I already knew. The strings were simple and legal. I turned on doorbell notifications so my phone would ping for knocks in motion. I asked the bank to text me for large transfers and new payees. The kind of alerts anyone is allowed to request on their own accounts. I checked that package and delivery notices were enabled, because footsteps sometimes announce themselves with a box. No trackers. No hacking. Nothing I wouldn't explain to a judge or to myself later. I packed like I always pack, making the right noises with zippers and drawers. I printed an itinerary and left it on the counter, a map of places I had no intention of going. She glanced at it, said, "Be safe," and kissed my cheek with the kind of politeness that feels like a locked door. Tests are messy. They make you feel small and sneaky. But living in doubt is messier. It eats your voice and scrapes at every ordinary moment until the ordinary breaks. I told myself I wanted romance. Truthfully, I wanted clarity. I timed my departure to miss her favorite rerun hour, waved from the driveway, and drove just far enough for the sound of my engine to fade. 2 streets over, I parked in the shade and watched the quiet house through my screen, the bouquet and bottle glowing in my mind like a promise I was trying to keep. I waited for the evening to tell me which story I was in. Shadows stretched long across the lawn and porch. Departure day looked ordinary until night fell. I left the driveway with a practiced wave and the kind of smile you wear for neighbors. Then took the first right, then the second, and eased the car to sleep under a sycamore. The bouquet and Bordeaux glowed like a promise in my rear view, but facts don't care about promises. I turned off the engine, silenced the radio, and stared at our porch through the phone as if I could will it to tell me the truth. The house should have been warm with TV noise and the laugh track she loves, a lamp on, slippers by the couch. Instead, the windows were dark. Her car was gone, not the quick errand kind of gone, but the settled kind, as if the night had claimed it for something I wasn't invited to. Rehearsed kinder stories. Maybe she drove to her sister's. Maybe the pharmacy. Maybe anywhere ordinary enough to calm a man who overthinks. Streetlights came on in a chain. A neighbor's dog made a lazy loop. I checked the gift on the counter in my mind and felt silly for believing a small box could outtalk whatever this was. 7 o'clock slid into 8. The phone stayed still. Every minute had weight. I pictured us on the couch years ago, trading forks between plates and arguing about nothing. The contrast hurt more than the quiet. I counted reasons to give it another hour. People lose track of time. Traffic happens. Phones die. I tried to slow my breathing, but each inhale sounded like a clock. When a car rolled past our street, my heart jumped, then settled as the taillights kept going. I told myself I would leave at 9 if nothing changed, that I wouldn't slide deeper into the habit of waiting for a door to open itself. At 8:42 p.m., an alert chimed and my stomach dropped. It wasn't the benign chime of a package. It was the tone I had set for motion at the front door, a note I hadn't heard in weeks. In an instant, my mouth went dry, my hands slick, and the world narrowed to a rectangle of light on my palm. Everything I feared, and everything I needed to know living behind a loading wheel. Somewhere between relief and dread, I knew the night would stop pretending and finally start telling the truth. I opened the app and held my breath. She stepped into frame first, keys between 2 fingers like she didn't plan to stay. Behind her came a man with a slim briefcase, the kind bankers carry, not flowers or takeout. No hug, no smile, just an exchange of glances as they crossed the threshold. I watched through the doorbell feed, each second stamped with time louder than my heartbeat. They moved past the entry, like people late for a meeting, voices low. The foyer light flared, then the hallway, then the study lamp near the front window we never fully closed. From the street, through the sliver the blind always leaves, I saw habits I knew, her quick, efficient hands. The drawer that sticks, the way she worries about a strand of hair when she's deciding what she won't say out loud. He opened the briefcase and set down a folder. She opened the bottom drawer and lifted the small lockbox we keep for important papers, the one we touch together on tax day and forget the rest of the year. She set it on the desk like a decision. He clicked the pen. She found a key. The lid rose. Papers changed hands. I told myself to breathe. I told myself to wait. I told myself not to read a story faster than the facts could speak. They weren't touching or laughing. They were writing our life in ink without me. The lamp put a gold square on the glass, and in that square I caught her mouth as she leaned closer and whispered the sentence that reset the night. He thinks I'm with my sister. 6 words, and something in me sat down. The bouquet in the kitchen felt like it belonged to different people. I felt the pull to storm the porch, to make noise big enough to drown their plans. But noise doesn't fix ink, and anger doesn't turn a key back. Proof became more important than confrontation now. So I watched the small choreography. Page, signature, nod. Page, signature, nod. He pointed to a line. She followed with the pen. He checked his watch. She checked the hallway. Ordinary movements, catastrophic meanings. I noted the time, not to be clever, but because memory bends when fear sits in the front seat. When the study lamp went dark and the hallway light returned, I slid back to my car and let the silence press its cool hand to my face. The doorbell feed showed them leave without ceremony. Him first, her second. Lockbox back in the drawer like a secret that had stretched and snapped. The house looked like my house again, which was the strangest part. I could have gone home then. I could have set the wine on the table and asked 1,000 tiny questions. Instead, I sat in the dark and told the truth to myself in a sentence I didn't want to carry. I needed more than hunches. I needed documentation. Midnight came like a held breath, and the house sounded different through the tiny speaker. I tapped a record on my screen, not to spy like a villain, but to remember what fear tries to erase. Their voices were careful, close to the door, drifting in and out like they knew walls sometimes listen. Move fast, the man said, paper shuffling. Tomorrow at noon, if possible. I can do that, she answered, steady in a way that used to comfort me. Once it's open, transfers won't flag. Open a new account first, he replied. Then everything else follows. I watched the timestamp blink, proof accumulating without permission from my heart. They talked in details that smelled like ink in banks and steps you don't take when you're proud of yourself. Sign before he's back, he said, and I felt the floor tilt under my seat. She didn't hesitate. He won't be back for a week. I swallowed hard against a throat that wanted to shout the truth into the glass. The study light brightened, dimmed, brightened again, like someone testing a signal. I wrote a single sentence in my head because writing it anywhere else would make it permanent. The envelope I hid for our future wasn't in the safe anymore. They went quieter after that, murmurs threaded with dates, numbers, and the kind of confidence people borrow from paperwork. We'll need identification, notarization, he said. We'll handle the deed later. The deed, she repeated, and the word sounded like a door closing on an old room. I thought about every small kindness we had banked, how many breakfasts it takes to build trust, how few signatures it takes to spend it. My hands shook, but the recording kept going, honest in a way my life wasn't. The hallway light went out. Steps softened toward the front. The audio clipped, then returned with a latch, a pause, a whisper. I heard my name, short and flat, as if I were a project to complete. When the door sealed, the quiet rang. I didn't feel rage so much as a cold, clean certainty. Flowers were for a different version of us. Facts were for now. I saved the clip, stared at the blue progress bar as if it could rewind a marriage, and watched it finish like a slow verdict. On the sidewalk, their silhouettes separated, then dissolved into the night. Somewhere a train wailed, thin and far, and it felt like the sound of something leaving for good, whether I chased it or not. I stayed where I was and told the dark a simple truth that felt like a warning. If I stormed in, I'd lose more than my temper. Morning smelled like coffee and printer ink, not roses. I drove to the branch when the doors unlocked and asked to speak with the fraud team. I didn't show them heartbreak. I showed them my ID and a steady voice. We reviewed the accounts with a manager present, every safeguard they could apply without breaking anything. They added extra verification on outgoing transfers, text alerts for new payees, and a callback protocol if anything unusual tried to move while I was away. They gave me a case number and the kind of careful look people reserve for someone choosing facts over fire. I didn't ask for anything I wouldn't sign for. No snooping, no backdoors, just oversight I'm entitled to as an owner. While they printed recent statements, I stared at the lobby plant and tried to remember the last time my life felt simple. The printer chattered in the lobby. Back at the kitchen table, I opened a folder instead of a bottle. Spreadsheets replaced playlists. Timestamps replaced laughter. I traced each line with a finger and matched it against my calendar. The boutique charge I'd rationalized. The rideshare ping on a pantry day. A hotel lounge tab 2 cities over. New to me were the drafts. Fees from a service we never used, and a payee nickname I didn't recognize. I circled them, not like a detective, but like a man trying to keep his world from blurring. I called the bank, read the case number, and asked them to review the activity I'd flagged. The representative confirmed what could be paused and what would require in-person verification before anything changed. We placed a temporary hold where it made sense and noted the account for manual review through the week. She walked me through legitimate alerts I could enable, and I agreed to all of them. Then I mapped the statements against last night's timeline. The doorbell footage said 9:07, 9:31, 10:15. The statements echoed with their own times. A draft queued at 8:59. A new payee profile touched at 9:35. It wasn't a movie. It was arithmetic, and it added up to a story that didn't include me. The more I looked, the less I recognized my own life. I took photos of each page and labeled them by date. I wrote a simple log: time, amount, description, what I knew for sure. I didn't guess. I didn't accuse on paper. I built a record for a calmer version of myself to use when the noise got loud. The kitchen felt like a conference room. The flowers in the trash can felt like a joke that had told itself too long. When the text alerts started arriving in real time, my phone hummed like a second heart. Nothing catastrophic moved, but enough flickered to keep me from pretending this was all in my head. Lawful steps don't make the ache smaller. They just keep you steady while it burns. I needed someone I could trust in real time. After the bank calls and the folder of printouts, I realized I needed something stronger than resolve. I needed an ally. Pride wanted me to shoulder it alone. Protection told me to pick up the phone. I called my brother-in-law, Daniel, the calmest person I know, the kind who listens all the way to the period. He answered on the second ring. "I'm here," he said. "What do you need?" I swallowed the part of the story that would only stir panic and gave him the simple truth. "Can you take the kids tonight?" No questions asked. He didn't flinch. "Of course. I'll be there in 20. While I gathered overnight bags, I kept my hands busy and my voice even. Toothbrushes, pajamas, the worn stuffed fox that still rides in a backpack, chargers, homework folders, sneakers. I wrote a short text to my wife, nothing loaded, nothing that would start a war. "Kids are with Daniel for a sleepover. We'll talk tomorrow." I read it twice to be sure it said only what it needed to say and took a screenshot for my records. Daniel arrived with a steady smile and a plan. "Pizza and movie night," he announced like it was already tradition. The kids lit up, and I felt something in my chest loosen. He didn't pry. He didn't offer theories. He looked me in the eye long enough to say he understood more than the words aloud. "You're doing the right thing," he said quietly, then turned to argue about toppings like an uncle is supposed to. I kept it simple with the kids. "Big treat," I said, zipping up their bags. "Extra cheese and one late bedtime." They asked if Mom was coming, and I answered with the only truth that didn't tip the world. "She's busy tonight, but you'll see her soon." We did hugs in the doorway, fast and warm, the kind you memorize. Daniel squeezed my shoulder on the way out, a small anchor disguised as a goodbye. When the taillights disappeared, the house settled into a quieter kind of quiet. No cartoons, no feet on the stairs, no requests for water right after lights out. Just the hum of the refrigerator and a stack of papers that looked like they belonged to someone else. Asking for help used to feel like failure. Tonight, it felt like foresight. The job was to keep the blast radius small, to make sure the smallest. Hearts in the house slept without learning new words for worry. Relief didn't fix anything, but it gave me room to act. With the kids safe, I could do the next necessary thing. The next thing wasn't loud, it was legal. Back inside, the house felt like a file room pretending to be a home. I set my phone beside the laptop, opened a blank document, and told myself to write what happened, not how it felt. First, I created a folder with today's date, then subfolders for video, audio, statements, and notes. I exported the doorbell clips, saved them as standard files, and captured still frames that showed faces. The briefcase, the lockbox, and the study lamp. I added the bank's case number at the top. Under it, I listed times pulled from the recordings, each on its own line. No adjectives, no blame. 9:07 p.m. front door opened. 9:31 p.m. study light on. 10:15 p.m. voices near door. I quoted the phrases exactly. Move fast. Open a new account. Sign before he's back. I put quotation marks where they belong and left the rest plain. Next, I gathered the bank notices. I screenshotted the alerts that arrived overnight, redacted irrelevant details, and labeled them by time, source, and account. I attached the printouts I'd marked earlier and took photos of each page, so there was a digital copy too. I added my call logs with the branch and fraud team, including names, badge numbers were given, and the summary of what they said they would do. It wasn't dramatic, but it was solid. I kept the language neutral. Noticed, observed, confirmed, received. Not betrayed, stolen, destroyed. A timeline doesn't need my adjectives to be true. For each entry, I wrote a single sentence about why it matters, supports patterned activity, corroborates presence, aligns with payee creation. Every time I felt anger trying to author the page, I stood, drank water, and returned to the facts waiting for me like clean lines. I saved everything twice, to the laptop and to a cloud drive I pay for. I'd printed a hard copy for a folder I could hand to a professional, then slid a backup drive into the kitchen drawer we actually use. I checked the files again and read the document aloud to hear where my voice might be getting ahead of the evidence. Where it drifted, I cut it. Where it needed a timestamp, I added one. My hands shook not from anger, but from knowing what had to happen next. The room was so quiet I could hear the router hum. Somewhere outside, a car door thudded, and I felt the old urge to walk into the study and demand an explanation. Instead, I looked at the stack I'd made: times, phrases, alerts, names, and understood that I had enough to protect, to intervene, to speak clearly without shouting. And I closed the folder and breathed once. I chose paperwork over a shouting match. I didn't want to fight. I wanted a process. At dawn, I called a family law office a friend once mentioned, left a calm message, and sent an email with my timeline attached. 10 minutes later, an intake coordinator wrote back, "Ring ID, bring your notes, come at 9. I packed the folder, the flash drive, and a new pen so I couldn't pretend I'd imagined any of it. The attorney, Miss Hart, listened without interruption, weighed each page, and drew a line down a yellow pad. "We'll keep this simple and lawful," she said. "First, a temporary financial restraining order to preserve the status quo. Second, notices to banks and institutions to preserve records. Third, a letter of representation, so communication routes through counsel, not your kitchen." She asked about safety. Any threats? Any reason to believe this could escalate? I told her no, just silence and plans made without me. "Then our priority is protection without provocation," she said. "You don't confront. You document. You let the court set guardrails." We reviewed what I had: timestamps, quotes, alerts, call logs. She highlighted the phrases that mattered and marked the places a judge would care about. "No adjectives," she said, smiling at my stoic sentences. "Courts like verbs and dates." She drafted the Troll request while I notarized an affidavit stating what I observed. The language felt clinical, and for the first time in days, steady. By sunrise, I had a black envelope of my own. Inside were copies of the filings, a checklist, and her card. The checklist was boring in exactly the way I needed. Change account passwords you own. Enable two-factor on personal email. Inventory valuables, photograph rooms, backup devices you own. Do not delete anything. Do not move money outside normal bills. Do not engage in late-night arguments. Ms. Hart explained the service. A process server would deliver the papers. Until then, I would keep my distance and stick to written messages that say only what must be said. If she contacted me, I would reply once briefly and refer her to counsel. If anything felt unsafe, I would leave and call the precinct. Dignity is strategy, she said. Let the paperwork talk. We scheduled the next steps. A follow-up within 48 hours. A bank call with her on the line, and a plan for temporary orders if needed. I left her office feeling smaller and stronger at the same time, like a man finally standing inside a frame that could hold the weight. Outside, I sat in the car and breathed. The path ahead wasn't pretty, but it was paved. I thanked Daniel by text and checked alerts. Now came the part I'd been dreading. She came home just after sunset, keys clinking softly, eyes scanning the room for the shape of our old life. I stood by the table with the folder closed, the bouquet gone. "We need to talk," I said. She hovered, then sat opposite, placing her phone face down between us like a shield. "I don't have much time," she began. "I've got a meeting." "I know," I answered. The screen filled with our doorway, last night's clock in the corner. I paused the video and scrolled to the clip with the audio. We listened to ordinary words carrying extraordinary weight. Move fast. Open a new account. Sign before he's back. She stared at the table and picked at a thread on her sleeve. "This is an invasion," she said. "You're spying on me." "This is our doorbell," I replied. "These are our accounts." I put my phone down and slid over the stack of bank alerts, each one small and undeniable. I requested verification, not access. The bank placed holds. They'll call for anything unusual. There's also a request to preserve records. Her eyes flashed. "You're making this bigger than it is. I needed advice. You're always gone. You don't understand how lonely this house feels." I kept my hands open on the table. "I'm not here to trade hurts. I'm here to be clear. There's a temporary financial restraining request filed this morning. A letter of representation goes out today. From now on, we'll separate counsel and communicate in writing." "So what? You're divorcing me?" "I'm protecting what we built and the kids while we figure out the truth with help that isn't anger. You told someone I was gone for a week so you could sign before I returned." She shook her head, then nodded halfway, words stumbling through stages. "Nothing happened yet. It was just planning. I was exploring options. You don't listen anymore. I needed to feel in control." "I hear that," I said, and meant it, even as something inside me tightened. "But control doesn't come from secrets. It comes from boundaries." I slid the black envelope to the center. "These are the boundaries." She touched the edge of the envelope, then drew her hand back like it burned. The room felt taller, colder. There's a kind of silence you never forget the sound of trust breaking. "I'll get a lawyer," she said, voice small now. "We'll see." "We will," I said. "For tonight, the kids are at Daniel's. You can rest here or take a bag. Either way, we won't discuss this by text after 10, and we won't meet alone until counsel is set." She stood, looked around our kitchen as if trying to remember where to put her hands, and nodded once. "Okay." She walked down the hall. I sat very still and listened to the new shape of our life settle over the table. The clock on the wall sounded louder than any apology. Breaking is one thing. What follows is another. Morning brought messages, not apologies. "You're overreacting," she wrote. "You're always gone. It was just planning." I kept my reply short and routed through counsel. "Please direct all communication to the address on the letter. Temporary holds remain." Every sentence I sent earned a longer one back, a tangle of blame and nostalgia. I didn't edit her story for her. I archived it and forwarded it to the folder that now carried our name like a case. By noon, she had called the bank to unfreeze what the bank had already promised to protect. An alert pinged, failed attempt noted, and I texted Ms. Hart. Alert fired at 11:27. No funds moved. Facts, not fury. I took photos of rooms, opened drawers, checked the lockbox, and recorded what was there without touching what wasn't. The house looked like the scene of a quiet argument with time. Friends started to light up my phone, soft concern carrying hard questions. She says you're spying. She says you're taking everything. I didn't argue the PR war. We're working through counsel, I answered. Please give us privacy. The fewer explanations I offered, the fewer versions I'd have to contradict later. At dusk, she knocked and tried a new angle. We can talk without lawyers, she said. We used to. I opened the door only as wide as the chain. We can talk when counsel is present, I said, and scheduled a time at Miss Hart's office. I didn't let late become loud. After 10, I stopped responding. Documentation is a boundary you can keep even when your heart forgets how. She cycled through scripts like costumes. You're punishing me. You never listen. You made me feel invisible. I wrote each phrase in the margin of my timeline without adding what I wanted to say back. The next test wasn't hers. It was mine. Could I protect without punishing? Could I hold the line without swinging it? At the meeting, she tried to float soft excuses. Nothing happened. It was only options. Miss Hart slid the timeline forward. Dates, quotes, alerts replaced adjectives. My wife's eyes flickered, then steadied on a point beyond my shoulder. The room felt airless, but the process breathed on its own. Back home, I kept the routine gentle and boring. I cooked simple dinners, laid out school clothes, and silenced the parts of me that wanted a speech. Every conversation with her stayed in writing, time stamped and complete. I answered logistical questions and let the rest wait. No midnight debates. No driveway scenes. If something stung, I wrote it down and handed it to paper, not to a person. The house still knew our names, but it didn't echo them back. In the quiet, I learned the discipline of not escalating. I checked locks, checked alerts, and checked on the kids sleeping at Daniel's, with their cheeks turned toward tomorrow. When the kids asked questions, I needed the right answers. They deserved truth size to their age, steady enough to hold Dot on Sunday afternoon. I brought the kids home from Daniel's. I had practiced what to say a dozen times and then decided to say less. We sat on the living room rug where we build forts, and I kept my voice low and plain. Mom and I have some grown-up problems to figure out, I said. You didn't cause them. You can't fix them. Our job is to keep you safe and loved. That isn't changing. They searched my face for a trap. Is it our fault? I shook my head. Never. They asked if someone was moving out. I told the truth. We were making a schedule while the adults talked, and for now, they'd sleep here most nights and see Mom on planned days. No villains. Just a calendar. Stability lives in small things, so I built us a day that could carry. I set out clothes before bedtime. I packed lunches the night before with notes I used to write when life felt lighter. Morning pancakes returned, first one burned, second one better. Drop-offs were early and unhurried. Afternoons ended at the table with math, spelling, and a bowl of cut fruit. At dinner, I kept the conversation ordinary. Highs and lows, I said, and we went around the table like we used to. After dishes, we took a walk around the block, counted porch cats, waved at Mrs. Lee watering her ferns. Bath, pajamas, books. I read the dog-eared chapter they love, and tucked the warm fox under a chin that finally stopped trembling. When questions came, I answered only what was asked. Will Mom come to the game? We're working on a plan. Are you mad? I'm sad and unsteady. We set one rule. Grown-up conversations stay with grown-ups. Their job is to be kids. In the spaces between tasks, heartbreak hummed like a fridge. Reliability was louder. I made checklists in block letters, color-coded the week, put the medicine spoon by the sink, laid out raincoats by the door. We practiced goodbyes without drama and hellos with both feet. Sleeping took a few nights to remember us. The first night was restless, questions rustling down the hallway. The second was a little easier. The first night they slept through, I knew we had a fighting chance. I slept on the floor outside their room, not because they needed me, but because I needed to hear the quiet hold through the night. I stood at the doorway and watched their breathing fall into the rhythm I'd been chasing. I wanted to stay there, and also to sit at the table and keep planning. I turned off the hall light. Then the official mail started. Arriving. The first hearing felt like a job interview for dignity. Miss Hart, and I sat at the petitioner's table with a folder that no longer shook in my hands. The judge asked simple questions and wanted simple answers. We requested temporary financial restraining orders, record preservation, and a rule that major decisions would require mutual written consent. Dates, not adjectives. Verbs, not theories. She arrived with counsel and a new narrative shaped for Wood and Seal. It was exploratory, her lawyer said. Nothing moved. The judge looked at us. Ms. Hart stood and walked through the timeline. The doorbell clips, the bank alerts, the attempted unfreezing, my affidavit. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the facts. The judge granted the temporary orders and signed the preservation notices on the bench. I felt the room exhale. Discovery followed like the weather. Subpoenas went to the bank, the hotel, the rideshare company, and the notary service named on the draft. We requested account activity logs, payee creation records, invoices, sign-in timestamps, and visitor ledgers. They weren't dramatic documents, but they told a story with ink that matched the one my knights had told me. Ms. Hart kept me focused on what mattered. Authenticity, dates, signatures, and who touched what when. Under oath, she filed a declaration that shrank and stretched the past to suit the moment. In deposition, the dates wouldn't bend. The hotel confirmed a check-in, matching her ID. The bank produced a log showing a new payee, profile created within minutes of the meeting. The notary sent a scanned entry with her printed name beside a time I remembered from the glow through our blinds. Her lawyer shifted ground. She reconsidered before any final transfer. The record added, after the attempted hold failed. When it was my turn, I didn't give speeches. I answered like we practiced. Yes, on the 11th, at 9:07 p.m., the door opened. Yes, the phrases I quoted were recorded by our doorbell device. Yes, I requested lawful account alerts and called the branch within business hours. No, I did not confront her that night. No, I did not move funds beyond ordinary bills. My voice surprised me by not breaking. The judge had little to say beyond the orders already signed. The point of temporary relief is to maintain the status quo, she said. Let counsel confer. Let discovery finish. It wasn't victory music. It was a metronome. Still, walking out with a stamped copy felt like a roof. The truth doesn't rush, but it arrives. It arrived in PDFs, in logs, in signatures squinting up from monotone pages. It arrived slowly enough that anger could sit down and let steadiness stand. I drove home with my tie loosened, and the envelope on the passenger seat, like a quiet passenger who knew the way. Traffic crawled past the steps. A teenager skated the plaza, and a woman fed pigeons like it was any other Tuesday in any other town today. Outside the courthouse, life kept going. I booked a counselor because I needed a place where the folder didn't speak for me. Dr. Lee sat across from me and asked for the short version, then asked for the true one. I handed her timelines. She handed me a pencil. Put the proof in a drawer while you're in here, she said. We'll work with feelings, not filings. I learned to say, I observed, instead of, she ruined. I practiced breathing before speaking, practiced pausing when the past wanted to rush my mouth. In that room, facts were anchors and anger was weather. Both real, not the same. With counsel, we built a parenting plan that didn't depend on goodwill to survive a hard week. Pickups at a neutral spot, drop-offs on time, a shared calendar we both could see, and a message app that stamped every word. No doorstep debates, no surprises, no using the kids as mail. When holidays came up, we chose even, odd, rotate, and wrote it down. The plan didn't fix trust, but it kept the kids' days shaped like their days. Work helped by being uninterested in my drama. Schedules don't care who sleeps. I showed up early, answered emails in order, ate lunch at the same table, and let muscle memory carry me through hours when thinking too much would have broken me. When my hands were busy, my head could rest. I took on the least glamorous tasks and finished them clean. Each small completion felt like sweeping a step on a long staircase. I leaned on friends like posts on a porch. Daniel checked in without prying. A neighbor waved me into a Saturday project. No questions asked. A buddy from the shop convinced me to walk laps before work, and we counted birds instead of problems. People brought food, not theories. When I tried to apologize for needing them, they laughed. Needing isn't failure, they said. It's human. Boundaries were the frame that kept the picture steady. I set a phone curfew and stuck to it. I stopped rereading old threads and stopped drafting speeches in my head. I unfollowed accounts that turned my stomach and turned off memories that arrived like uninvited guests. At home, I cooked on Sundays, filled the freezer, set the coffee the night before, and wrote a new list for the fridge. Water, sleep, sunlight, movement, call a friend. Healing isn't loud. It's 1,000 small, boring victories. There were milestones I didn't expect. The first night, I didn't check alerts. The first laugh that didn't feel borrowed. The first pickup that ended with a simple wave. Her messages shifted to logistics and stayed there. The kids' calendar filled with ordinary circles practice, recital, game, and ordinary felt like a miracle I could afford. Shame got smaller. Gratitude found air. I still had the folder. I just didn't carry it everywhere. I slept a full night and woke without rehearsing arguments. That felt like progress, like breathing again today. Months later, the outcome arrived. The settlement came through on a Tuesday, stamped, signed, and ordinary, looking for something that rebuilt a life. Assets were protected, accounts unwound without drama, and the house stayed in my name with a plan for equity that respected the work we both did. The court kept the financial guardrails in place for a cooling period, and the preservation notices turned into archives instead of weapons. Relief wasn't loud. It sounded like paper sliding back into a folder that could finally live in a drawer. Co-parenting rules stopped being a theory and became a calendar. Pickups and drop-offs at the same place, the same times. Holidays split and rotated, vacations requested in advance, travel itineraries shared without commentary. The message app kept us brief, polite, and exact. Expectations reset. No late-night calls, no driveway debates, no revisiting old arguments in front of small ears. We were no longer partners. We were a team for two kids who deserved grown-ups. Home remembered me again. Quiet evenings returned first, like shy animals. I cooked simple meals and taught the kids to chop and stir. We brought back our weekend breakfasts, laughing about the first pancake that always burns. We fixed a wobbly chair, changed a porch light, and planted herbs in a chipped blue pot. After dinner, we walked the block counting porch cats, and I learned the art of listening to stories that zigzag and matter anyway. We reclaimed hobbies that once felt too heavy to lift. We built a kite together and watched it shiver into the sky. We dug out the old guitar and relearned 3 chords. We started a tiny book club with hot chocolate and 1 chapter a night. On Sundays, we drove nowhere in particular, letting the playlist find us, singing the wrong words on purpose until we got them right. The house didn't echo like it used to, but it was steady, and steady felt like grace. The life I thought I'd lost didn't come back the same. It came back honest. I kept the black envelope, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that boundaries are kindness when love gets confused. The kids grew taller while I was watching. Some nights I sat on the porch with the lights off, counting crickets and promises, letting the quiet say what words couldn't, grateful for breath and second chances. If you're still with me, hear this. Here's what I took from all of this. Trust the knot in your stomach, but let your head steer. Testing a spouse isn't love. It's a sign that trust is already limping. Even so, pretending not to see won't heal anything. Notice the small changes, write them down, and give yourself permission to see clarity without cruelty. If you're standing where I stood, choose safety and the law over drama. Gather proof you're entitled to doorbell clips from your own device, bank alerts from your own accounts, dates and quotes you personally heard. Don't break rules, don't hack, don't follow people into danger. Document neutrally. Times, actions, outcomes. When your feelings surge, put them on paper, not on a person. Set boundaries early. Move conversations to writing. Keep nights quiet. Ask a steady friend or relative to help with the kids before you confront anything big. Call a lawyer before you call for a fight. Let institutions do the heavy lifting. The courthouse can carry more than your kitchen table. If there's any chance your situation involves violence, coercion, stalking, or threats, don't wait on a tidy plan. Leave first, call emergency services, and get to a safe place. When you can, contact professional support. I've placed domestic violence hotlines, legal aid links, and counseling resources in the description and pinned comment. Different countries have different numbers. Use what's local to you. And if you're unsure, a trusted shelter or hospital can point you to the right line. If this story helped you think clearly or breathe easier, a like and a subscribe really do help these stories reach the people who need them. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I read every comment I can. Share your experience if you're able. Be kind, protect your privacy, and remember, we're not here to attack anyone. I'm not your attorney or therapist, but I can remind you that steadiness is possible. You're not alone, even when it feels quiet.